Good afternoon. I'm Mike Parsons. I am from the organization called SAVE, stands for Save Alabama's Values in Education. I'm here with a group of cohorts that are concerned about our education here in Alabama because it directly affects our youth, which directly affects our future for this country. You know, I'm going to speak to you primarily about a subject that we typically call Common Core. But the term Common Core means many things to many people. Some people will only want to talk about the standards. The rest of us want to talk about all the other changes and processes that we made in order to implement the standards. So when we're talking about war versus issues, we face many issues today. This very complex, complicated system. It's about 23 trillion rabbit trails last time I counted on this subject. The key point I want you to know is we'll never see the war today. The war we're fighting for, whether we win or lose, is probably 15 to 20 years from now. Let me just go over, I'm going to give you a few facts and I'm just going to skim the surface. If you have any questions, I want you to feel free to ask me. In 2011, Alabama was 25th in the nation in national education standing, according to the information that Alabama Department of Education put out. In 2012, in exchange for No Child Left Behind Act waivers from the United States Department of Education, Alabama Department of Education was required to do these things. One, they were required to transition to college and career-ready standards. If they wanted waivers from the No Child Left Behind Act, they had to transition to college career-ready standards. That was your Common Core state standards. The definition of college career-ready standards were the standards that many other states use. There was only one set of standards at that time that fit that bill. That was your Common Core state standards. So we had to go, if we wanted a waiver from No Child Left Behind Act, we had to go transition to Common Core state standards. We had to develop and we have to administer assessments. Obviously, the assessments have to be aligned with the standards. The other thing we had to do is we had to develop guidelines for local teacher and principal evaluations. And I'm going to tell you why later on. Can you imagine why we had to develop guidelines for teacher and principal evaluations? Data. Somebody knows something about data? The data measures, they needed to see improvement with the children. I will talk all about that in a moment. And the fourth thing we had to do was develop and implement a state-based system of differentiated recognition. So in 2012, we implemented the Math Common Core state standards and the assessments. One of the assessments, I want you to pay attention to this, one of the assessments we implemented was career interest and aptitude assessments. Everybody got that? Career interest and aptitude assessments. What's that got to do with academics? Can anybody think of a good reason we're collecting that data on our kids? How many parents do you think know that every time their kids are throughout the school year, they're collecting the career interest and aptitude data on their kids, which has really and truly nothing to do with academics? In 2013, we introduced the English language arts and their assessments. Now, I want you to know that the math and the ELA Common Core state standards were also used extensively in history, social studies, science, and technical documents. So we implement the ELA standards. At the same time, they shut down what we call the Alabama High School graduation exam. Just for a refresher, the Alabama High School graduation exam was a 5-part exam. It was statewide controlled. It had, and the kids could get a high school diploma if they passed the reading, they passed the math, and they passed one of the other 5 parts, remaining parts. If you didn't pass the Alabama High School graduation exam, it didn't matter if you were passing all your classes at school, you still could not receive a high school diploma. We started testing the kids with the Alabama high school graduation exam in the 10th grade. We tested them in the 11th grade, and then I think they had 2 shots at it in the 12th grade. And once you passed a part, you were through. You didn't have to go retake that again. All we required were the kids take the test, pass at least 3 parts to get a high school diploma. And the thing I liked about that exam was you couldn't intimidate anybody. No teacher was involved. No teacher could be intimidated about go ahead and pass these kids, even if they did not deserve passing. So just a refresher, we implemented the math standards in 2012, the ELA in 2013, and we shut down the Alabama high school graduation exam in 2013. You think that had something to do to show success, ensure successful transition of the Common Core state standards? Because we had to stay on a positive note as we implemented these standards, because there was going to be blowback from the math standards. The next thing I want to talk about is 2 years later, actually a year later, 2014, they started promoting what they call this counseling plan. It was called the Comprehensive Counseling and Guidance Plan. I want you to key on 2 main issues. This plan did 2 basic things. One, it was a data-driven program. They actually changed the words to a data-informed program after we raised so much fuss about it. But today in the state of Alabama, for the last couple of years, every child in 8th grade public school sits down with a counselor. The counselor is using the data derived off the assessments. And that child is being put on a 4-year education plan. So when they go to high school, they're on a 4-year plan. Y'all realize that's a socialist template they use over in Europe right now. Now in some countries the child can branch off, and the parents can say, no, we want a different career pathway. In some countries over in Europe, the child doesn't have a choice. The parents don't have a choice. They have to follow through. I explained this setup of what is happening in Alabama today based off the data that's collected off the assessments that's aligned with the standards, the Common Core state standards. I explained this setup a couple of weeks ago to a senator, and he didn't see a problem with it. What's wrong with the counselor helping the kid decide what career pathway they need to make? The problem is this is a tremendous amount of influence we're shifting over to the state and federal government versus the child and the parental impact on deciding where the child should go. How many parents do you think refute a 4-year education plan that the child sent home with from school? Doesn't the school know what's best for my child? I'm being a little facetious there, but that's what's happening. Okay, the second thing this plan did is it had the counselors start to, and key in on my words, introduce competencies to the kids in various age groups. You would think of these competencies as your value systems and your belief systems. So in various grades, these concepts are introduced. They call them competencies to these little tiny kids, and once they're introduced, they will reinforce them through the 12th grade. I'm just going to give you an example of one because there are pages and pages of these competencies. Here's one: respect alternative points of view. That is introduced in grades 3 through 5 and reinforced through the 12th grade. Now, if you take a broad look at it, you say, well, what's wrong with respecting everybody's alternative points of view? What's wrong with that? Well, some viewpoints I can just go along with, some I can ignore, but don't ask me to respect them. For example, let's say one person's opinion is it's okay for 2 men to go and get married. But if you're of religious belief, you may believe that no, a marriage is between a man and a woman. Well, if you think the marriage between man and a woman comes from God's Word, then how can you compete God's Word with the school's word of saying you got to respect everybody's opinion now? Do you see the conflict there where you're taking a little third or fourth grader and now they can get confused where, well, my parents say this is wrong, but the school is saying, hey, if that person says that's their opinion, I got to respect it. You may could tolerate it, you may could investigate it or examine it, but to say we got to respect everybody's opinion, that is absolutely almost like gender neutral. That's wrong. Another thing Alabama did in 2015, I'm going to read the quote, and this is a report they sent to the federal government. They said, implement a positive behavior support or other related student and school culture program to support the student ownership of their actions that includes alternatives to traditional disciplinary actions. Basically, they changed the discipline policies in the state of Alabama. Now, I taught in high school for a number of years. I can tell you once the kids find your limits, once they know how far you're going to go or when you're not going to pursue or take action against them, you've just turned over the keys to the school to the kids. And it can become a very chaotic and dangerous place. So in 2015, the Alabama Department of Education documented and sent to the United States Department of Education, the federal government, and they said, we're going to implement a positive behavior support or other related student and school culture program to support the student ownership of their actions that includes alternatives to traditional disciplinary sanctions. Basically, what they did is they said, we're going to go ahead and totally change discipline policies in the state of Alabama. And I believe it's hard to get the statistics on this, but I think many teachers will tell you in certain schools and certain school districts, we've totally lost control of what's happening in the classrooms. We've actually turned the keys over to the students, and the students are in charge. So in 2011, we were advancing in education. For the last 5 years, we've had a declining student population in the public schools. Our school population has actually been going down. I think it's down by 1% now in the state in public schools. Now we're bouncing around last place all around in national education standards according to the National Assessment of Education Progress. By 2017, we had fallen to 45th in the nation. So the bottom line is, right now over in the Senate yesterday, Dale Marsh dropped a bill to repeal the Common Core state standards. That bill does everything we want it to do. It removes the standards, takes away the assessments. We go back to the curriculum of study that we were using, the ones that we were successful in, and while we do that, we will actually have time to go out and investigate and actually find standards other than national standards that have rigor, that give us the independence we need to teach our children and raise our children the way we believe they should be raised here in Alabama. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you, if you want more information, you can go to stopcommoncore.com, and that will be kept up to date on what's happening with that bill. I believe it's called Senate Bill 119. Thank you very much.